Hello to all the comic fans, Marvel geeks, and all the nerds in between. Welcome to another episode of the Vigilante Vibes podcast, where we talk all things Marvel without the toxicity that's taken up way too much space in the fandom. I'm your host, Megan Nicole, and today we have a very special two guests that I'd love to introduce. One of them developed X-Men, the animated series, for television and served as a showrunner, and the other wrote for the series, and together they are the dynamic duo that brought our favorite mutants to television. Please welcome Eric and Julia Lewald.
Hello, hello, hello.
Thanks, Megan. Glad to be here.
So happy to have you guys here. So why don't we start all the way from the beginning? Where did your interest in X-Men start?
Okay. You really want to know?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
About 12 hours before we got the job.
Let's go on the Wayback Machine,
Yeah.
all the way back to
It was
1992.
February '92, and we both worked with the people at Fox before on other stuff. And on a Sunday night, we got a call saying, "Guess what, you guys? The X-Men's happening. Eric, you're going to run the show." And I said, "That's a Marvel book, right?" So I'd never touched an X-Men comic the night before, where I had to meet Stan Lee and everybody to talk about my vision for the series. So and it was before the internet, so we couldn't Google it. And
Oh my gosh.
on Sunday night, the comic book stores are closed, so we can't go check them out. So I just had to keep my mouth shut during the big meeting and let everybody else talk, which they were happy to do.
Was there a reason they thought that you would know about X-Men, or were they just like, everyone knows about X-Men?
No, it was just as a real practical thing, like anybody else's work. I'd worked with the guy there that was making the decision about which of maybe 7 or 8 people he knew might run the show, might be the best to do it. And so he just picked me for my TV animation writing skills or tone, or the thought that my writing might fit the X-Men better than the other people he had option to do it. So it was a professional hire, not a fan hire.
To set the stage, though, you and I met as writers on the Disney Afternoon at Disney. We were in
Right.
offices next to each other, and that's how we met. And I was writing animation, you were writing animation. And after 3 years at Disney, everyone's contracts were like, okay, go join the freelance market. You worked on some shows and ended up running the 4th season?
The last season of Beetlejuice, which Fox has just started as a little bitty network. It was like half a network. They're on half the day. And they gave this wonderful woman named Margaret Lesh the presidency, and her right-hand man, Sidney Iwander, who was the hands-on executive for all the cool shows, like ended up being, Batman and Spider-Man and everything. It was his.
The Tick.
Yeah, so I'd worked with him for a couple of years in the 7 years of my career. One was helping him develop shows for a Japanese company called TMS, and then that last year Beetlejuice. So I had a long history with the guy that was doing the hiring, and that's how it came. But yeah, I'd been writing in TV animation for 7 years, so it wasn't like he just picked me because he was a buddy. It was, we'd had a long professional experience together.
And your tastes, your sensibilities.
Yeah, our sensibilities.
You'd had the chance to do that and work together for a few years. And then when it came time to pick someone to sort of be the showrunner for X-Men, it was a function of the work you'd done with him.
Yeah.
And who they thought had the right sensibility to craft a show based on those books.
And we were really lucky. There's this balance on the show. The 2 or 3 other main creative people, Sidney knew and loved the X-Men. Larry Houston, who's the head artist, who's like in charge of all the artists, the way I was in charge of all the writers. He had read just about every X-Men comic there was since the early '60s, and Will Mineo, who was kind of overseeing the whole production, also was a huge Marvel fan. He was, had got his little Marvel Society fan card in like 1961. So there were people on board that really knew what the X-Men were, and they just wanted me to get a group of writers together that could make it intense.
It was such a frantic time, though. Larry Houston, what was the doc? He had a book, and he photocopied, black and white photocopy. Was it the Marvel Universe?
Yeah. Just so they were very helpful. There was like reference books that would have all the characters, and I bought a set of cards, just
The trading cards.
to know who
Yeah.
everybody was and what their relationships were and what their powers were, and a little bit about what their histories were. And so it was a pretty quick study.
But Larry Houston had to get you photocopies of that one Marvel book to give you information.
Because they didn't have them there. But it was. We worked really fast back then. I mean, people were hand painting, so that took forever. They took hundreds of people overseas drawing the show. But we were hired in mid-February, and they were expecting it to be on the air in September.
Yeah.
And no computers and no internet, and it was, so we were like 3 months behind when we started. So we all went very fast, and there wasn't a lot of time. Nowadays, Marvel is so huge. It's this multi-billion-dollar company. I'm sure that all sorts of people on the new show are looking over to make sure it's exactly what's good for Marvel. At the time, Marvel was a struggling comic book company and nothing else, and they even went bankrupt in like '96. So they didn't really have time to oversee us. They just kind of crossed their fingers and hoped that we came up with something that was okay.
And Marvel Comics was in New York City.
Yeah, it was in New York. We were out in LA, and so it was hard to communicate. There was no email, there were no cell phones. So
Yep.
if they'd read our scripts and they might have some ideas or some notes, we'd fax to each other. Or when the show got recorded, they'd snail mail audio cassettes to everybody so that we could all hear what the episode sounded like from the.
And the voice talent recording all took place in Toronto, Canada.
In Toronto, Canada. So we're all separate. So we're all just working as fast as we could in our own little corners and hoping that everybody else was on the same page. And we talked to each other on the phone, or we
From 9 to 5 LA time.
yeah,
I mean,
and we would fax each other questions and notes, and so we kept on top of stuff. And if something was felt wrong, we'd talk about it. But mostly, everybody was just really. It's like it was a daily newspaper or something. We just got the stuff out as fast as we could because there are all these artists and craftspeople waiting. Where's that script? We got to draw a 900 picture storyboard to send overseas, and got all these animators waiting. So today it's real different with the computers, and everybody's locked in, and as soon as somebody changes a little something in the design, everybody sees it. It's just so much more efficient, much faster. But we had a great time.
I heard, I believe it was Lenore Zand that said it was very complicated without the internet because they didn't know if anyone even liked the show. They were just kind of sitting in the dark until they were asked for more. So that whole situation sounds very, very stressful. Like, I'm a little anxious for you.
So Margaret Loesch, Fox Kids president, determined that she was going to make an X-Men show. But the folks above her didn't have confidence in the project. So you only got 13 episodes.
Yeah, and it was a weird time. It's hard to think back to '92. There had been no successful Marvel shows on television, really. I mean, there hadn't been. They tried a few things on Saturday morning, and they just could never get the tone right. They would be like little kid shows instead of the kind of intense stories that Marvel liked to tell. So there were no great hopes for it. In fact, as Lenore said, it was the same for the writers and the artists as it was for the voice talent. As soon as we were done with the first 13, we were all let go. And we're off trying to work on, we had two babies. We're trying to get work for the 4 months we were waiting until all the shows were animated and to see if it was going to be successful or not. So we went off and worked on a show called Exo Squad and got it going. It was not a time where 90% of America didn't know who the X-Men were, and that's hard to imagine now. But that was what we were told by our bosses. They look, you got to understand. The fans know, the fanboys and fangirls.
The comic book fans.
The comic book fans know, but that's like 2 million people, and maybe if we need more like 10 million people to like this show, and so you guys have to write this stuff for an audience as if, and thinking in your mind as if they don't know what a mutant is and they don't know who these characters are or what's at stake. And be really clear about it, and be really, keep that in your head, because if you write it like you're a fanboy, you're going to mess. All these people aren't going to get what you're talking about. You have to be really simple and clear. And we were writing for a kid's time too, so we also had to be kind of simple and clear.
That's very true. I never really thought about it because that was before the movies. That was before it became so mainstream. Imagine going into that show, watching it for the first time. You're like, he's a Wolverine. That's an animal. Like, I could see how that's very, very confusing for a lot.
I want to give all credit to Will Mineo and Larry Houston for, if you go back to the original series and watch the opening title sequence, that was crafted over one.
That was like a long weekend for those two guys, and they made this beautiful thing. And
to introduce each character.
Because people were worried that, okay, this is such a confusing universe, kids aren't going to remember, and you're trying to tie some stories together, they're going to forget.
And they're going to have code names. What? You can't do that. Kids will never keep
Each character's got two names. This is
Except
going to
for
get
Jean
weird.
Grey.
So that was one of the things that Margaret made sure of, that we got their names in the credits, and we showed their powers in the credits, so we wouldn't have to keep reminding people of that or new people that are coming to episode 6, and they hadn't seen the previous episodes. There wasn't any streaming.
No.
If you missed the first 5, you missed the first 5, unless your friend, VHS videotaped them at home. So we had to just make sure that everybody was kind of up to speed, and the credits did a lot towards that, which is weird, but it just, that one little minute every week really helped.
Mm-hmm.
I can say it helped me as a child because I remember I was too young to read comics at that time. X-Men, the animated series, is what got me into it. So I remember watching it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what Wolverine or Nightcrawler's deal is, but I like them. So I'd say the opening credit really did do a huge service.
Sure.
So you talk about how when it first started, there really wasn't that big of a fan base, but looking at it now, it's like no one doesn't not know what X-Men are. Did you anticipate the cultural impact the series would have?
Well, again, no.
No, nobody did. I think Margaret was confident it would be it was a perfect property for an animated show. She saw it. She saw girls could like it, boys could like it, adults could like it, and she couldn't get her bosses to understand that, and she and Stan had been pitching the show for 7 or 8 years in Hollywood back before Margaret got her job at Fox, and nobody at the networks wanted to touch it. Nobody could get these books. So no one had any big expectations. So in that way, it was a little easier for us. The X-Men 97 people had to come in being told, well, there are a couple 100 million fans around the world that know who these characters are and love them. You guys better not screw up. So there's a lot of expectation and pressure on them that we really didn't have.
And 60 years of comic book history versus 30 years of comic book history that you had to deal with or be aware of.
Yeah, so we were kind of writing it under the radar and a little bit for ourselves, and as I say, Sidney referred to us as a garage band, and referred to, while he's referring to Batman as cool jazz, because Batman had this big budget and all this beautiful artwork that they could linger on, and he just shook his head and said, man, you don't have half that budget, you better make this thing rock. So we tried.
Now, the fact that it hit, oh God, so many near misses in terms of the show just collapsing. Like I said, you were hired to craft the show and come up with 13 episodes. That was it, and like I said, we were all let go. But so those first 13 episodes, it was like, well, hey, let's push as far as we can on all of these moments, because this is all we get.
Yeah.
Then when animation started to come back for the September release date, most of it was not.
It was
viewable.
awful.
It was awful. And Margaret made the strategic decision to hold back the release date to January for X-Men, and came up with the brilliant idea of what she could salvage of those episodes, episode 1 and episode 2. She aired them on Halloween night in prime time on Fox, and I thought, kids are going to be out trick-or-treating. no one's going to be home watching this, but the
But they
timing
were.
was right. It was perfect.
But they watched it.
Big hit. They repeated that again, I think, in November.
In November, around Thanksgiving, they repeated it again. And so all these, instead of being one of maybe 30 new shows in September, when it came out in January, it was the only new show on kids' TV. And so that gave them kind of a boost. Obviously, it cost Fox Kids like hundreds of thousands of dollars to delay it because they had to show reruns for the entire fall, and that lost them a lot of money. So
And
they
they-
never would have done this on purpose. But it was a kind of a boost to us that we were able to start in January. I think the problem was when the overseas studios bid to do the animation, they were literally used to doing stuff like Scooby-Doo or Super Friends, which is really kind of simple and slow
Moves
and
flat across the
flat
screen.
and not much drawing. And X-Men was this big, it was this big spectacular thing, but they thought they could do it at the old, like a Scooby-Doo budget. And then they realized, oh my God, they can't. And so that's why they had to have the delay the first season. They had to redo so much of the animation and then negotiate, well, if you're going to do a second season, we can't pretend to do it at the price we did before. We're going to have to make it a little more expensive. So all that went on during the fall while they were figuring it out.
The internet didn't exist then. We didn't get immediate feedback on anything. The Nielsen ratings were a thing, though,
Yeah.
that we would be notified about through Fox. And almost immediately, X-Men became the #1 show.
Yeah, within about 4 weeks.
And not just #1 in its time slot, but beating ABC, NBC, CBS combined sometimes.
Sometimes,
It
yeah.
was- it
Yeah,
was- wow.
when Fox started on Saturday morning, they would get about 5% of the audience. ABC, NBC, and CBS would get the 95%, and they get a little dribble over from Fox. And as she said, 4 or 5 weeks in, we were getting 40% of the audience, and sometimes as much as the big networks combined. So it was a real phenomenon. It was a real cultural. All the kids were telling the other kids at school, you got to see this cool new thing. And that lasted for the 4.5 years we did it.
Yeah.
They didn't stop doing it out of ratings. They just new people bought into Fox, and Margaret was gone, and so they just stopped
People didn't have-
caring about it.
Didn't have the same ownership rights in the property. So,
Yeah.
Wow, like 40% after a few weeks. That's crazy. Well, congratulations on that.
It is. To look back on that, my God.
And now we meet people like you from everywhere around the world, Latin America, Asia, Africa, Europe. They say, "Oh, I grew up on X-Men. I grew up on your show. I grew up watching the stories." And some people learned English watching the stories, or whatever.
We had no idea.
But when we're here, we were just writing them. We were writing on our dining room table.
There was no office.
Yeah, there was no writer's room. It's just like they said, we need 13. Okay, the head writer Mark Edens is a friend of mine, and I came up with the 13 and handed them out to people we knew were like my wife.
You came up with the first 13 at our dining room
At
table.
the dining room
That was
table,
our
yeah.
unofficial office.
So, and then they wrote them, and I polished them up, and we handed them off, and there was no big to do. We'd get notes from everybody. From the
You'd get notes from
I'd
everybody.
get notes from everybody and have to kind of squeeze them in there without ruining the writer's script. But yeah, so it was a real simple project, but we didn't get it. It's not like a performer. If you're a rock musician and there are 50,000 people in the stadium listening to you, and you have a really good song, you can feel it because the place is shaking with how much they love it. If we have she writes Days of Future Past, and 100 million people watch it and love it, she doesn't feel it because she's just on to the next. She's still at home typing, and the audience isn't there. So we started feeling it though at cons. We started going to cons about 8 years ago
Because,
because she taught me to write
Yes.
a book.
so Eric, I consider this the oral history of the making of the X-Men show called Previously on X-Men.
Yeah.
And that gave us an excuse to go to cons because we're not storyboard artists, we're not voice talent, we can't talk, we can't draw you anything, but that became our way into cons, so we can tell you the story of how the show happened.
Yeah.
And that was remarkable to start going to cons.
It was really great, and then meeting the fans, and there's just more and more of them. And X-Men had been off the air for a few years.
Oh, few, yeah.
But then Disney Plus came along, and it was back, and then suddenly the word of X-Men '97 was. So
well, not suddenly, but
eventually X-Men '97 came along. So there's all these things that built towards its return, and but all during that time, we kept on meeting people. Said, look, I watched it with my dad and my grandmother, and now I'm watching it with my kids, and so that kind of stuff was really gratifying to find out how many people actually watched the show and enjoyed the stories.
Yeah,
it was great.
I get that. I have one of my daughters. She is 5 years old. She is autistic, so she can't talk. But she loves X-Men. She loves X-Men, the animated series. She calls it the Storm Show, or sometimes the Juby Show, which is short for Jubilee.
Jubilee.
Yeah, she loves it. And you guys gave me another chance to watch it through her eyes. So it's been such a beautiful experience because it's something I watched when I was a child. And it's funny how these generations just keep getting sucked into the X-Men. They have a spell on us and we can't stop.
Well, I like to think so much of that, and we talk about this a lot. The X-Men, they have superpowers and things go bright, sparkly, and splashy, and they fight big robots, and there's a lot of, big stuff.
But there's action in lots of other shows.
But the X-Men stories that you were able to craft with all the writers, I think really hit on the sweet spot of what was going on personally for each of the X-Men characters and how they had to deal with that. It's the personal stories that are the ones, and they're all personal stories, but I think that's been the thing that folks have been able to respond to and have responded to for over 30 years now.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
Rogue, for example, who would want to give up their mutant power would be Rogue because she can't touch anyone. And if she and Wolverine switched powers, he'd be happy. He'd go off and live in the woods, and he wouldn't touch anyone, and he'd be fine. And Rogue would not use her adamantium claws, and she'd be fine. She'd be able to touch someone, and she could have that life. But the thing that's her biggest X-Men power is also her biggest personal sadness, and I think that applies to each of the X-Men if you look at it closely. Yeah. And that makes for great storytelling.
Yeah, that's how people always ask you, well, how did you choose the stories? Because there was 25 years of X-Men comics before that. And since the head writer and I really had never read the comics, we didn't start with trying to adapt any of the issues. We just we went from the characters, like what's the most intense Beast story we could tell, what's the most intense Rogue story we could tell, and then once we decided on one, like say the Beast story where he falls in love with the blind girl, Beauty and the Beast, which Julia came up with.
And our friend Stephanie Matheson wrote the script.
It was all, there's lots of action going around it, but the core story was all about him and what he was going through as a mutant that looks so different.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that was the starting point certainly for our best stories, was a character thing that really focused on a person. Like we wanted to introduce Nightcrawler and say, okay, who would be the most intense person to introduce Nightcrawler with? And I thought, well, Wolverine's like 95, and he's probably been through, he's probably lost 100 friends and had faith and lost it before. He's somebody that could talk to Nightcrawler about the struggle to keep his faith. Whereas it was Jubilee, she was 13. She might not have even thought about that yet. And since Nightcrawler's thing was how devout he was, we played him immediately right up against somebody that maybe would like to be devout but doesn't know how to, or has lost it.
And it wasn't proselytizing. Gambit is also in that story, Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested. I mean, but it was an examination of faith and religion that I don't think I've ever seen on a Saturday morning kids show.
Yeah, so it wasn't the episode wasn't about religion. It was about it was about meeting Nightcrawler, which we all wanted to do, and about Wolverine's struggle to feel it or not. And
got to give a shout out to like the third key player in this whole thing between Sydney and Margaret.
Oh yeah, Avery.
Avery Coburn was the woman who was the broadcast standards and practices person at Fox Kids, and she'd come there from live action, and she was a fan of the X-Men books. And she understood what the X-Men stories were like. So when you would approach her with ideas, and she had absolute control. She could she could kill anything.
Yeah, she could just say Nightcrawler's too controversial a character for kids.
Yeah.
You can't use him. End of discussion.
She could say that, but to her never-ending credit, she didn't. Especially when you and Mark came up with the opening, the two-parter that opened the series, Night of the Sentinels.
Yeah, and we decided that to show that there's real heroic sacrifice going on, and that there are stakes and true jeopardy for the X-Men being the X-Men. We decided, well, we need to have one of them die in the opening story.
And when you told me that, I said,
this was going to be more. And more fans remember that than anything. You know, they're watching this kid show, and they're in the beginning of episode 2, and suddenly the most fun character in the whole team is dead. And that it really grabbed people and made them understand that being an X-Men wasn't a casual thing.
But Avery Coburn understood.
She got it.
She understood it, and she gave you some rules. There were guidelines you had to follow.
Yeah, he had to be off screen. It couldn't be gratuitous. Had to be about his everybody else's grief, not about him suffering at all during this. And so there was a nice long list, but she was thoughtful and trusting enough to talk this through with me back and forth, rather than just saying no.
Right, and she could have. Every
other one of these people we've dealt with in the past, dealing with the TV censor, would have just said no. I'm not gonna get angry letters from 800,000 mothers saying, why did you kill this person in front of my child? And which could happen. I mean, that there are people at TV stations are worried about children's programming, because when you do something that parents don't like, parents write in and parents tell their congressman, and it was a real pressure on broadcast TV back then.
The catch to that, though, was when the ratings went through the roof, X-Men was a huge success, and then you get called back to do one more season. What would be season 2? You didn't get a bigger order until season 3. But okay, come back and we'll do season 2.
We'll do another season. Great.
Yay.
And so Sydney, who loved the fact that we killed Morph and thought it was a great thing.
I think a lot of us did not mind it. We were like, if you had to kill someone, it might as well have been Morph.
And just, he just understood it dramatically. He really understood it was important for the stories. And he called me up and said, look, the great news is that you've got 13 more. You're going to get 13 more, and you can feed your children for another 6 months. The bad thing is that we just showed a few episodes to a big room full of 9-year-olds, asked them who their favorite X-Men character was, and Morph won by a landslide. Focus group. So he said, is there any way you can bring him back? So that's why Morph came back damaged, PTSD, is because a bunch of 9-year-old fans said, we love him and we want to see him again.
But if you showed in a focus group, if you showed 2 or 3 episodes to kids, that's because you and Mark did such a great job setting up who Morph meant to each of the characters. He mattered. He had a very special so that when he died, it would be a huge emotional thing for each character. And I swear that's what.
Yeah, we made him too lovable.
We made him too lovable. Yeah. Oh well. So he was supposed to stay gone. He was supposed to. I can tell you that. I was there. I heard it happen.
It's so funny how different it is now, because, you have this focus groups on focus groups about Morph dying, but then you get to X-Men 97 and Gambit dies and traumatizes millennials who have lived with this character for so long.
Right. They've been waiting all this time for those two to get together.
Oh my God.
And the 97 people not only tease you by having her flirting with Magneto for 4 episodes, but then he sacrifices himself and he dies.
I love watching the reaction videos on YouTube. I didn't know those things existed, until fairly recently. But I love that, sitting here 30 years since the first show, going, no, people have had 3 decades to sort of marinate in
And
the
be
original X-Men
invested
show,
in
to be
them.
invested, to have those feelings. And I love that everyone is feeling that together as it's happening.
And it was funny, for Marvel, about a quarter of our cast were pretty much new characters. Gambit had only been around for a year or so in the books. Jubilee was pretty much brand new. Rogue was fairly new. So these were people that the comic book Marvel people hadn't really fleshed out that well. What's Gambit really like? Because I would call the head guy over there, a wonderful guy named Bob Harris, and say, well, we're going to do a bigger story about Gambit's history. Can you tell me more about him? And they said, well, not really. We've only done, 9 months worth of, we've only done a few issues with him in it. We're still figuring him out ourselves. So, okay, let's keep him mysterious. And that was kind of fun. Because obviously you know what Scott's like, you know what Wolverine's like. They are so upfront about themselves. And Gambit's more mysterious. And so that was in part because they just hadn't quite figured him out yet in the books. And so we ran with that.
I'd say it paid off. I think that's one of the biggest things that drew everyone to him. Is like, he's the cool guy. He's the guy you don't know about. The guy that girls go for. At least for me. 100% me. So speaking of Gambit, who was both of your favorite mutants? Like, which one did you, I don't know, connect with the most?
Getting to be a writer on the show, my answer is always Beast. And the reason is because Beast technically is the smartest person in any room. He's a damaged poet. He's got the romantic soul. It really is, Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. He can't walk down the street without everyone pointing at him going, that's a mutant. He can't hide. And he doesn't, but every now and then you see him feel those things. The fun part was, so as a writer, you get to pretend you're the smartest person in the room when you write for a character like Beast. And in the pilot, you had him a call to action.
Yeah, that's like, you remember other cartoons like, Cowabunga or, Go Joe, or, I mean, your team is about to leap into, and in the industry they call it a call to action. And it's, if you're going to have a big toy-based action show, you need, before they leap into it, they have to have a call to action. So I thought, well, if Beast is going to have a call to action, it should be something obscure and literary and poetic. And so we just did it that one time in the pilot, just for fun, to amuse ourselves. And everybody liked it. All the production people and the Marvel people really enjoyed it. So then writers, when they got an assignment that had Beast scenes in it, they'd kind of compete to see who could come up with the more obscure literary reference, or if they didn't put one in, I'd put one in when I was polishing it.
The literary quotes of Beast by resident philosopher.
In the book, there's a whole chapter just on his quotes.
But that was fun too. And again, before the days of the internet, and it's over there on our shelves, Bartlett's Book of Quotations. Yeah. That was how.
Yeah, we weren't that well read. We just would say, okay, Beast,
what do we need a quote?
Yeah, Beast is about to jump off a mountain here. Let's look up quotes about mountains or jumping, or So it was that kind of that's the incredibly primitive Googling or Chat GPT was Bartlett's Book of Quotations.
And how about you? Your favorite?
Oh yeah, I had to love all of them because I had to think of each of them as we were polishing up the scripts, and you have to be, live within them all. But the one I felt closest to of all people, who's not the biggest, the most charming one, was Professor X, because he was in charge of 7 or 8 very different people, and they had a common goal. And we had, over the course of 5 seasons, I had 20 different people writing for me, including Julia. But so there were 20 different writers, all of whose style and vision I had to kind of ease into making it feel like it was all one show. So I felt very much like this bald father in a wheelchair, keeping them all on the same page and all doing. So I had a great empathy for him. And he had to give a lot of long speeches, and he had to, so. And a lot of the other characters were much more fun, certainly for the kids watching. But yeah, I felt closest to Xavier.
That makes sense. I mean, being in your position as like the head writer with a whole bunch of teams under you, I mean, that's very understandable. So, was there a favorite memory of working on the animated series?
Wow.
Was it the fan letters?
Well, okay. This is not that, but everything having to do with X-Men the animated series, that was such a marvelous chapter in my life, in your life, in our lives. And then 30 years later, X-Men 97 comes out, and then when X-Men 97 was nominated for an Emmy,
Yeah.
didn't win, but it got nominated. That was, for me, a huge sort of validation. The original series was never got nominated for anything, which I always stuck in my craw. But the fact that X-Men 97 has been so well received, to me, is indicative of how much love there is for the original series.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, there was a favorite moment for me that when we got hired to come on to just as advisors, just as consulting producers.
Consulting producers.
And what that basically means is a bunch of people your age did all the work building the world of X-Men 97 and drawing it all and making the stories work and doing all this. And they would then show us, let's say, a first draft of a script or an animatic, a rough version of what it looked like with the first voices on it. And we would give notes to say, okay, here's something you might be able to do a little better, or we see something here we really like. Can you do more like this? So we were just being advisors on it, and really, again, it's 99.9% their work. But the showrunner was so nice. He set up a surprise for the staff, a surprise Zoom call. And this is back. Was this still COVID-y? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably the tail end of COVID when a lot of people still working from home.
That's true.
But he got like 60 of the staff together, artists and staff and writers, and had them on, and he was just running this Zoom call as if it was a normal Zoom call. And then he said, oh, by the way, we've got a surprise for you guys. And the two of us and Larry Houston, who was, again, the head artist on the first designer on our show, were waiting by our cameras. And he popped the button, and the three of us came on, and this was when they announced that we were going to be part of the show. And they hadn't told any of the people. And they were clapping and crying.
It was a big moment.
Oh, that's so nice. I love how close you are to Larry Houston. It seems like we can't hear you guys' names without hearing his. You guys are so intermingled together through this whole X-Men journey.
Yeah, we were, and we had never met him before this show. He worked in animation. He's done over 100 shows. We've done 50, but he's done over 100. Amazing. And so we'd worked on others. We knew some of the same people because it's a pretty small community, but we'd never worked with them before. And again, in this, we didn't work in the same office, but we were constantly. I don't think that a day went by that I didn't send him something or he didn't send me something. So we did this thing together from day one, and it was so creatively satisfying that we just feel like family now after doing that for 4.5 years with him.
But also, it's kind of funny how now, in 2025, how often did you get to sit down and have a meal with Larry Houston?
Oh no, I don't think I ever had lunch with him.
No, there was no time. There was no time.
We were just all cranking the stuff out, and we had to get to the next bit, and so we were going so fast, and then.
And we worked on other shows together, but
then once we met each other, so there were half a dozen other shows that he'd draw on and we'd write on, and vice versa, and so we kept in touch. But it's funny that way. It's all this work that we've done with people. It's like with the cast. When we wrote this book in 2016. neither one of us had ever met a cast member.
Nope.
We did 76 episodes. They recorded all these episodes. They read everything we'd written for all those years. We'd heard their voices for all those years. And we didn't know what they looked like. We didn't know because they were in Toronto. And somebody else,
Handled that.
voice directed them, and we just would make notes on the tapes. So when I did the book, I got to call all of them and got to know them through the interviews for the book.
Yeah.
And now, starting about 5 years ago, when they started coming to cons, because they didn't know about cons, they're up in Toronto. Oh, no one's told us that fans are interested in us. They want to meet the person that did Jubilee or Rogue or Wolverine. Really?
Yeah.
They want to pay for our autograph? You're kidding.
Yeah, that was a big game changer.
It was a big deal. So 4 or 5 of them came down to a con in Texas with
Our
us.
first time ever.
With us and Larry, and they liked that, and they liked the attention, and gradually over the last 5 years, now they go to cons all the time,
Yeah.
and everybody's getting to know them, and it's like a whole second career for them.
And working on X-Men 97 now.
Yeah,
too,
and about half of them
which is very gratifying.
are working on 97. So that was another nice connection that the people of the new show made. They tried to get as many of the old cast into the new show as they possibly could.
Which I loved. Even if they recast them as another role, they still had a place in the family, which I thought was such a beautiful thing.
It was.
Doesn't happen often in Hollywood. We'll tell you that right now.
So, speaking of X-Men 97, do you remember how you reacted when you heard it was happening?
Boy, did we get the... Okay, we may have gotten the... We heard, a little more plugged in now, that, Disney was acquiring things, and, it looks like they've acquired Marvel. Well, that's interesting, huh? Now that... Because when you wrote previously on X-Men, there was no single holder of the rights for X-Men. Everything had been sold off.
20th Century Fox, because it was Fox TV, had some rights, and I think Saban had some rights, and Marvel Disney had some rights, and so they were all spread around. And when Disney Marvel bought 20th Century Fox about 3 years ago, suddenly they could make another show, because fans had always asked us, "Is there going to be another show? Is there going to be another show?" And we said, "We don't think so until the rights get together, because you can't make a show if somebody else owns a third of the rights to it. They'll just sue you, or they'll demand 10 times too much." So finally, it's all together, and we're we know that it's going to be high on their list.
Because I found that Disney Plus had put out a
fan list. They've gone online and they said, asked all the fans
Here are
all around the
200
world,
shows,
and said, we have all these properties that we're about to put on Disney Plus.
What do you
Which is going to start in about 2 months. Which are you most excited about? We've got all the Star Wars stuff. We've got all the Pixar stuff. We've got all the Disney movies. We've got all the Disney animation stuff. We've got all the Marvel movies. We've got all this, and they listed 30 different huge properties they had, and at the top they listed I think 75 or 100, and number one by some margin was our show,
X-Men the Animated Series.
It wasn't Star Wars. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't Toy Story. It was our TV show.
Oh, so then your book comes out in 2017. All this Disney stuff is kind of happening.
Yeah.
But we did this on our own, or you did this on our own. Then you get an email from the vice president in charge of global licensing for Marvel Disney, and we went, oh crud, they're going to slam us down.
They're going to get mad at us for doing the book without them.
Instead, they reached out and said, we're going to do a book about X-Men the Animated Series. We'd love it if you would do this book for us, with us, but we're doing it either way. Are you interested?
Aww.
And so we jumped on board, and
You have to.
we can tell you that this has also served as like a model sheet for the folks on X-Men 97.
Yeah.
But crafting that book, and with that coming out, we're starting to hear things. Like Disney's putting this book out, Disney Marvel's putting this book out because there's interest in an animated X-Men.
Yeah.
And then
So we knew there were bubbling interest, and then we got a phone call saying it was happening.
Or we heard from the voice talent that
That they were being contacted that if they were interested in doing a new show. So,
But not X-Men. There was a code name, but I swear one of them said the sides they got to record were the original sides from the
From our
animated
show.
series, but names were changed.
So-
And they said, I know what this is. You know?
yeah, they tried to be clever about it and not let everybody know they were doing a new show, and everybody saw through it.
Yeah. Which
Well,
was
some
delightful.
did. I talked to some of the voice casting for X-Men 97, and I think it was Guy and Isaac both said they're like, I had no idea it was X-Men. I found out at the end. I did not know what I was doing, but when you're a young actor, you just audition for everything.
Sure.
And I'm like,
yeah, of course.
imagine that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And
They're young people. I mean, which is wonderful. And it's delightful. It's delightful. But again, for them to pull as many of the original cast members back as they can in all capacities
Yeah, that was
is very
great.
exciting. And then we got the call that they're doing X-Men 97, The Art and Making of Book.
Which just came out.
Came out July 1st, and we got to do an
wow.
introduction. We prefer that. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a fine book, but X-Men, The Art and Making is more, we wrote that one all the way through.
Yeah, so we love that one more.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's so cool. And look at you, like you have 3 books right there. You have a wildly successful show. You're working on another wildly successful show. You guys have achieved so many amazing things and touched so many lives.
The touching of lives is the thing that makes my heart sing. You and I, when we first started dating, were bonding over, and I say this a lot, our mutual admiration for the original Star Trek series, which
Because
is,
when we were little, that's what we geeked out
that's
over.
what I got to watch.
You guys have been nerds from the beginning.
Oh my
I love
God,
it.
try being a geek nerd girl in Texas.
Oof.
Decades in the last half of the last century. Oh, that terrifies me when I hear people talk like that. But so Star Trek meant and means the world to me. Then we get to work on X-Men, the animated series, and we find out after when you're writing the first book who was on X-Men, the animated series.
right,
This
yeah.
kills me because we didn't know.
We didn't know while we were
Didn't
doing
know.
it, but the voice of Apocalypse, who we just loved writing for, he's one of our very favorites. He was also, the actor was the very first Klingon.
In the original Star Trek series.
In like the spring of 1967, Commander
Kor.
was he was going against Kirk, and in the first season of Star Trek, and it's the same guy. So
John Colicos.
John Colicos was
Great
dead. Sadly, he passed in '07.
So we didn't get a chance to talk to him about it, but
Never
we
met-
didn't know.
We didn't know.
didn't know that I got to work with someone who worked on the original
We
Star Trek.
got to write
Oh, you got-
dialogue for the first Klingon. but yeah, that was a cool thing to
But
stumble across.
yeah, for something like Star Trek to touch the kind of lives it touched, because it touched me, and then to sort of feel this little invisible thread connecting all these things is, good
Yeah.
Lord,
Yeah.
good Lord,
Yeah.
yeah.
Works in mysterious ways. That's so. I had no idea that was Apocalypse's voice. Like, that's so cool. I love knowing that. Well, as we wrap up, I want to thank you both for all you've done bringing these characters life, changing an entire generation, giving us all these different types of role models and representations to look up to as a child. It means so much because I told you about my daughter, and we finally have something we can both relate to and both love, and she gets to learn all these amazing things. And she's screwed for life because she is going to be the biggest nerd in the world. So this is her life now.
One of us.
Yeah.
One
Yes.
of us.
She's got a community. She's got a community.
She's got a community with depth and breadth here, baby.
An action figure.
And action figures.
She has the action figures. She tries so hard to say the names, but it ends up being I think the other one, she called Nightcrawler a bapple. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to roll with it.
We're like Ezekiel. There's some various words for a devil-like character I don't know anything about, but we'll give her
I think
credit.
she heard him speak German one point, and that stuck to her. And I was like, "There's no way you are speaking German." So if you guys taught my kids German, that's kind of amazing.
No, we have a story we tell on our 2 sons who are now young adults themselves. Your father was from Germany, and I'm half German, half Welsh, just generationally. And when our kids were little, oh my Gott in Himmel, We were trying to, instead of cursing
My-
or something,
yes,
oh
it's
my
a-
God in heaven.
My God in heaven in Germany. And in German,
It's
oh my God, mein Gott im Himmel. And it comes out
from our kids.
from our 2-year-old, oh my goaty pimple.
So that became a phrase in our house. Oh my goaty pimple. It's like, okay. So German, yeah.
Fun German.
Fun German. Yeah.
God, I love when kids say weird things wrong. That's like my love language. It's just everything to me. So thank you two so much for
Sure.
coming on. Where can our listeners find you, and where can they find your books?
I am on the interwebs way too much. We are on Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter X, and we are at X-Men TAS. And we use X-Men TAS for X-Men the Animated Series because Star Trek, the original series, is Star Trek TOS. So we're X-Men TAS basically wherever you can find things like that. We even have a website that we got to get back to,
X-Men TS 92.
which has, no, just XmenTAS.com.
Oh, no, yeah, okay. My bad.
XmenTAS.com. A font of information there if you like to go in and dig around archives.
Yeah, we put a lot of stuff on there for about 1.5 years, and then we kind of ran out. But yeah, as far as the books go, they're available.
Barnes and Noble. We were just there yesterday.
Yeah, the new ones at Barnes and Noble.
The art books.
They probably don't have the other ones in stock, but if you guys want to get in contact with us, we tend to keep a few cases of each one here, and if you want a signed one, we'll be happy to, we would take, Venmo or PayPal or something, and if you pay us, and we will sign and ship you one directly from our office.
And our email, because it's on all our different sites, but it's xmentas92@gmail.com. So there are ways to find us.
Yeah.
And again, just I do the X and the Instagram and all that. Good. Having found a community of X-Men fans, it's a nice place. It is not the septic sewer that's around everything else. It's just people having fun memories, people remembering things, people finding fun things, like Wolverine ice cream sandwiches from the 1990s. So come find us that way, and on podcasts.
Yeah.
And we will be at LA Comic-Con in September. We're not making it to
end of
San Diego
September.
this year.
Yeah, end of September, LA Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Well, that's perfect. Whoever is watching or listening to this episode, if you just look in the show notes under the episode, you will see all the links to everywhere you can find Eric and Juliet. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vigilante Vibes. Wherever you're listening, please click that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my amazing guests like Eric and Julia or any other future episode. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a marvelous night.